Hello, everyone, and welcome to our last session of the day. We're having three separate publishers today. So Dan Simon from 7 Stories, Patricia Nelson with Princeton, Yale, and Joe Murphy with WW Norton. So if you folks want to take it away, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dan from 7 Stories. Thanks for being here. It's been a long day for everybody, I think. So I'm going to just start with a plug for Indie Playlist. Please, booksellers, sign up at indiepubs.org with Anna Thorne there, because the minute bookstores sign up and say, I'm doing Indie Playlist in October, that's going to trigger the publishers to go to our people and say, buy the Indie Playlist titles from these bookstores. You know, in the past, we haven't known till the end of the month who actually did it. Now we finally got the bright idea of doing the sign up. So do sign up. I'm going to talk about some 7 Stories titles this fall, just some fall titles that I'm trying to kind of do, like quality and sales potential, you know, things that I think can work in your stores, and books that are also books that I love. So, the things and I'm doing old style here. This is my personal physical manual PowerPoint. The Things We're For is Inosanto Nagara's new book. Obviously, A is for Activists got a huge push this summer as we saw a real social movement dawning in this country. And this is a book that is, of all his books, it's the closest one to it. A is for Activists. It's kind of, okay, you grew up on A is for Activists, you know what community and activism is. And here now you're a little bit older and you know, it takes it a little bit further, but it's big, it's splashy, Ino's art just gets better and better. I think it has huge potential. We're getting behind it. We're doing consumer advertising and all that sort of thing to drive it into your stores. I'll just randomly open to a spread. You know, it's just to die for. I love this book. Next, we're doing the paperback of Kurt Vonnegut's Pity the Reader, which he wrote together with his student, Suzanne McConnell, who really put it together after Kurt's death. But we did it in hardcover. It was a surprise hit for us last November, and the paperback edition is coming out. You know, again, great sales potential. And then this is a book, especially for you all on the West Coast. Chloe Hooper is an Australian writer who's won many awards for her various books. She's paperback by by Vintage and Scribner in the UK. We feel very lucky to have her. And this is a book about fire. And it's the story of the Black Saturday fires in Australia, which were the biggest fires historically until this year, and about the person who set the fires. So there's a kind of element of find the arsonist, but she's so sophisticated in terms of what fire is to us today, which is different. You know, the history of fire goes back to it walks hand in hand with the history of humanity and the human race, right? Our species and our mythology. But suddenly what fire is to us is very different. And she really gets into it. So, you know, it's a book that I would want to hand sell to folks, certainly all over the country, but especially in the West Coast. She's a beautiful writer. And this is a deep, profound kind of telling of what fire means today. So y'all are, you know, selling, I hope, a lot of the new Ferrante book. It's great to see that, number 2 on the bestseller list, An Independent House. And Ann Goldstein, who, you know, I think is a big part of Ferrante's success in the English language, translated this book for us, which has just come out, I think this past Tuesday, maybe. And it's a book, also Italian, also a father-daughter story that was shortlisted for the Strega Prize, Italy's great prize last year. And it's just a beautiful story. So if I had just read a Ferrante and I was coming to a bookseller saying, give me something else, I love the Ferrante, you know, here's the same translator, a beautiful story, a new voice, but it's still kind of Anne's voice. So I'm very excited by that. And a beautiful cover in the 7 Stories new series look, which you see in both of these. And then I'm going to mention, I don't know why I'm in California today, but again, the great East Bay writer Barry Gifford. This is a collection of basically all his Roy stories. It's a kind of love letter to the lost age of, the kind of 50s, early 60s, Chicago, New Orleans, where Barry grew up. And, it's one of his big legacies are these stories that he's been writing for 30, 40 years. There is a movie also called Roy's World, a documentary that's been hitting the festivals and getting a really good response that's kind of out there at the same time that may also help this book. And one of my favorite authors and books, Guadalupe Nettle, again, kind of a favorite of indie booksellers. Guadalupe is a young Mexicana writer. This is, I think, the fourth book of hers that we've done. I think her mastery is in the short story form. This is just 8 short stories. She writes about a kind of animalistic vision of humanity that is where, humans are kind of a strange animal, and she writes about us as strange animals. It's beautifully translated. I think this is the one where she really has found her voice in English. Exquisite little gems of strangeness. Abdella Taya, 10 minutes seems like a long time. Abdella Taya is again, this is, I think, also the fourth or the third maybe book of Abdella's. He is a Moroccan gay writer based in Paris, and also a filmmaker, but his books are gorgeous. And as a Moroccan Arab gay person, his personal story has been kind of important from that side also. This is translated by Emma Ramadan, first time she's translated Abdella's work for us. Again, a beautiful book about sort of exiled North Africans living in Paris as a kind of demi-monde there of, prostitutes and their admirers. And then there's someone who, a man who, it's kind of based around this prostitute and the people who love her, who circle around her in different ways. Again, a gorgeous book. I also am going to mention Annie Ernaux's new book, A Girl's Story, and of course, The Years. A lot of people have discovered Annie Ernaux with The Years, which won a bunch of awards and was shortlisted for the International Man Booker in 2019. And, I've been publishing Annie for more than 30 years, and this is really, she's reached a kind of, icon status, and she's getting all the most major awards. And this was a difficult book for her to write about herself as an 18-year-old. It's a kind of piece of the puzzle. Each of her books are pieces of the puzzles of her life. She's really one of the creators of autofiction, the genre where everything is factual, very literary, but also completely factual. And this is the part of her own story that was most difficult for her to write about herself as a 17, 18-year-old. And then finally, I'm just going to mention, because as you know, we do kids' books, literary titles, and politics. And we did do a book in July that I think is very important, which is called How Trump Stole 2020. And we're just releasing it, I think on Tuesday, in Spanish as well. And this is, I'm holding up the Spanish language edition, which just arrived today. But, I think it's really important. There are groups buying, bulk copies and giving them away. It's really just about how to protect your vote this year, which obviously, it kind of used to be a marginal issue. Greg was kind of one of the few people talking about this. And now, of course, everyone's talking about it, but he's the one who knows the most about it, Greg Palast. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now, next up is Patricia. She's also going to be showing physically.
Well, wonderful to be here. I want to thank Calvin, Valentina, CALIBA, and my audience who are hanging in there on a long day of wonderful books from my colleagues. I'm going to start with Princeton University Press and a little book I hoped would come in the mail today, but it certainly is in the mail, a series of fortunate events by Sean Carroll. You know him as a great science writer, very brilliant. He's talking about accidents such as the asteroid 65 billion years ago that cleared the way for mammals, or possibly the unique chance of being you. That would be 1 in 70 trillion to bring the DNA together to make the unique individual. So you may have seen the fabulous trailer that's out and about, getting a lot of social media from Princeton. And also in Princeton Science, I love this book, Kenneth Catania's Great Adaptations. He's a marvelous biologist, lots of field work and really incredible pictures all through it of star-nosed moles, electric eels, and small voles and strange creatures you might not have known were there. It's a book about the evolution of such things as the mole's star nose and what it might be for. He takes up zombification. That would be wasps and cockroaches. So the book is very lively and fun and just out. And we're also going to look at Think Least of Death, Spinoza on How to Live and How to Die. This is almost a kind of interesting little genre like Sarah Bakewell's book, How to Live, a rich embrace, close reading of Spinoza's moral philosophy as you might take it on yourself. Nadler is terrific. You may know his graphic novel, Heretics. And this again is just getting out on the shelves. Lots of you have enjoyed this little series. This is Ancient Wisdom for Modern Readers, advice from Suetonius, from Seneca. And now we have a new one, which will soon be on our shelves, How to Be Content, from Horace, who's giving us advice in an age of excess. And this just seems so perfect for quarantine, you know, while we're making our sourdough bread or knitting or whatever. Horace will help us out, encourage us in our long solitude. Most of us have some kind of fantasy going on in that quarantine. Mine, the backyard farm. Mine includes a goat and maybe a miniature Italian donkey. So this series from Princeton, you've seen the bee, you've seen the horse, the pig. These books are so nice. They're packed with color, every kind of goat, you know, the Angora, the Nubian, the fainting goat. They're all here. And finally from Princeton, a paperback. I have it in hardback, but it's out in paper. The Fire is Upon Us. This is Nicholas Bucola's book on the extraordinary debate between James Baldwin and William F. Buckley Jr. We can still see that debate on YouTube, and it is still shocking. And Baldwin is so much our mentor through this period, and this is one of the books that can expand what we know of Baldwin. So I'm going to move over to Yale with a little book that we love, Eileen Miles, For Now. This is in a little series of why we write. Many of you, of course, know the Patti Smith devotion that came out in that series. She talks a lot about place, and that would be, of course, New York City, so much her place, but also Marfa, Texas, her retreat, and about time, the time it takes to be a writer. So it's a deep book about practice in her inimitable style. Another book that happened to be on Yale's list, kind of an apt book for this moment, is The Anatomy of Grief by Dorothy P. Hollinger. And I would describe this as sort of a body, mind, spirit, full take on grief, both the ambient, ambiguous grief I think we're all feeling now, and very particular journeys, both the body itself as a creature, how do we grieve, neuroscience, how does our brain is affected by grief, and the deep personal, individual, spiritual process that really cannot be predicted. I love seeing Dan's literature and translation, and Yale, it's one of the great publishers of translated literature, and we have a brand new Patrick Modiano. This actually did arrive today, which to my amazement, Invisible Ink. And we know him, very Parisian, very noir, very sultry. This is kind of a cold case detective story. He returns 30 years later to an unsolved crime, which in fact is an unsolved book that he actually wrote 30 years ago that he's writing again. So it has all kinds of layers. And again, we have a fabulous translator, Mark Polizzotti, and Modiano has really created his very own niche, I think, in literature. We also just released Harold Bloom. I love Harold Bloom, who has passed away. I don't know if you can see him here. And this is his swan song to all great things. The book is called Take Arms Against a Sea of Troubles. And you know, he was famous for being able to recite, you know, for pages and pages on end. And here he brings us Shakespeare, Blake, just a wonderful, rich reading, Montaigne. He has some advice in this book. He says, rise at dawn and read something that matters as soon as you can. So this is, you know, clear the way before your social media, a few minutes for that moment of a text that might inspire you. So it's kind of wonderful to have him with us still in that book. We also have a paperback that released this week. And I think this was one of my favorite books to sell in the last few years, Lakota America, Pekka Hamelanen's great book on 500 years of the Lakota people, as we know them, digging deeply into the history they kept as winter counts. We're kind of more familiar with winter counts with that new novel right now. The book has won so many awards. It's covered in glory, but my favorite was the Reading the West Mountains and Plains Regional Award for Nonfiction, and that is the banner that we have put on the front of the book. So it's great to be celebrating the regionals with the publication of the paperback. And I'm going to end with a book that's in the news today, Richard Hassan's book, Election Meltdown. The news has gotten so busy that he isn't going to be on CNN tonight after all, but we were hoping he would be with Anderson Cooper. I think that's still planned in the next few days. But he looks at voter suppression, incompetence, dirty tricks, inflammatory rhetoric, many reasons why this election needs special attention. The book has been called Prescient and Extremely Fair. It's good on all sides, and another one to keep on our radar in this very difficult time. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Okay, now up next is Joe Murphy. Let me pull up
Thank you.
real quick.
Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here. I'm Joe from Norton, and thank you, CALIBA, for having me. I'm going to do a little medley of fall and winter titles, so I will get rolling. The first one I would love to talk about is A World Beneath the Sands by Toby Wilkinson. I've enjoyed this book so thoroughly. It's a good book to compare it to. There's a book that came out about a year ago called The Anarchy from Bloomsbury, which was about the East India Company, which showed that it was sort of empire masquerading as business. This is about empire masquerading as Egyptology and archaeology. This was not a scientific exploration. This was a race between England, Russia, Prussia, France to grab up as much of the riches of Egypt as quickly as they could, as manageable. So it's a lot of fun to read in that sort of way, but on the other hand, it also really contextualizes the damage that empires do when they invade another culture. So that's The World Beneath the Sands by Toby Wilkinson. That is coming out this coming month. I'll talk next about my favorite fiction on the fall list. It's called Adrian Geffel by David Haju, who you may know for Positively 4th Street, the Dylan book, and a couple other major books on music. This is his first novel, and I didn't know what to make of it because I knew him for nonfiction. I love this. I thought this was one of the best comic novels I've read in years. So Audrey Geffel is this musician, avant-garde musician in the late 70s, early 80s, and she has this fictional form of synesthesia where her emotions pour directly out on the keyboard through her hands. And because she's usually in some sort of turmoil, the music is incomprehensible and aggressive and unpleasant, and no one understands it. So the critics, of course, think she's a genius, and she becomes like the darling of the avant-garde music world overnight. Problems develop when she actually finds herself in a happy relationship, and the music starts becoming light and melodic and charming, and all the critics turn on her, and her sales drop off, and her agent and her manager are trying to find new ways to make her miserable again. It's pretty funny. It's also told by, like, in great short bits by people who know her, and Hiju really can, like, capture a character really quickly. It's a terrific read. So that's Audrey Geffel by David Hiju. Next up, boy, is this a big California book for the fall. The Man Who Ate Too Much. This is the biography of James Beard, someone who's like right up there on Parnassus with Julia Child and Alice Waters in terms of the 70s food revolution in America. Birdsall has been researching this book for 20 years. He's a genius. This is a really terrific read. Beard is an incredible personality, very beloved in California as well. And it's pretty startling take about the perniciousness of life in the closet as well. It's a really amazing book, and I have to say I love this retro cover as well. So that's The Man Who Knew Too Much by John Birdsall. Next up, okay, I in the last month have turned into a World War II nerd, and I've never read anything about World War II before, but I've read this entire trilogy by Ian Toll, which is, I'm assuming I'm in a little corner camera here somewhere, so I'm going to hold these up too. It starts with Pacific Crucible, and then it goes to The Conquering Tide, and now finally the new one, Twilight of the Gods. And it covers the entire Pacific War, soup to nuts. And Toll is such an amazing narrative storyteller. I never thought I wanted to read World War II history. I'll put it this way. I was reading the first volume, and the Battle of Midway was coming up, and I thought, oh, I wonder who wins that. Like, literally. So that's the level of conversion that this trilogy has had. I mean, it is so great. I can't recommend it enough. I think it's a really important history, and I'm glad Twilight of the Gods has really hit the ground running, both with reviews and with sales. So I think that's being recognized. Our other really big history book for the fall is the new Jill Lepore, If Then, which is just landed. And as much as I love these truths, in a way, this is a more direct, immediately involving book because it's a very tight narrative. I mean, it's not a short story, but it's a really well brought together narrative about something I'd never heard of, which is the Simulatics Corporation, or Simulmatic Corporation. And they were effectively the forerunner of the more sinister side of Facebook or Cambridge Analytica, where they tried to analyze and thereby control people's behavior. And they were everywhere. There's one of these computers in every Madison Avenue ad agency. There's a reference to it even in Mad Men, actually. They were in the Pentagon. They were in the DOJ trying to analyze patterns of civil unrest in 1968 after the death of MLK. It is amazing how widespread and how pernicious they were, and what an interesting group of characters built them. Jill Lepore, of course, is an incredible historian, and she's doing lots of media for this, including her podcast and a bunch of others. So definitely, it's a great read. Actually, one of my accounts told me they thought it was the best book of the year this year. So If Then by Jill Lepore. Next up, a major biography, also already nominated for a National Book Award. I believe If Then is too, if I'm not mistaken. So 30 years in the writing. Les Payne started in 1990 interviewing people who knew Malcolm X, because most of them were still alive in 1990. And he has put together the best researched, most significant biography of Malcolm X, full stop. And he does sort of confront the issue of the Marable biography, which he says is under-researched. So I think this is going to be a major occasion. As I said, it's already a nominee for the National Book Award. I think the timing is incredibly important this year as well. It happened to work out that way, and I think it's a great thing that we have it. So that's The Dead Are Rising by Les Payne. So I'm going to do some winter titles real quick now too. What is Life is basically astrophysics for people in a hurry, except for biology. It's a nice little 107 or 143 page intro to biology, everything you need to know about it in like 2 nice sittings. It's in that sort of same package, about the same trim size, and with what I think is a wildly attractive cover. Paul Nurse is actually a Nobel Prize winner, and he's an incredibly engaging, very easy to follow writer for this introduction to a key science. Small Time. So Russell Shorto is a really terrific historian, but this is him writing the history of his family. And what I sort of like, because he is a historian, not a memoirist or a novelist, he's not trying to write the novel of his family. He really researches this like an historian. It's really quite fascinating. His grandfather was involved in the mob in Jonestown, Pennsylvania. The small town mob was apparently a really big deal. Not only there, but there was a string of them across the country tied into the actual Cosa Nostra. I had no idea. It is a terrific read. It's engaging. It's kind of weirdly charming, even though, you know, people do get occasionally bumped off in the course of it, but it's a great read. And I just found out that it will have a cover blurb from no less a mob expert than Francis Ford Coppola, which would be kind of fantastic. So that's Small Time by Russell Shorto. Another great history, and this has been getting really great response from the indies, is Four Lost Cities by Annalee Newitz. Newitz is known very well as a fantasy writer, but in this case, she's gone back and done all this incredible historical research, you know, whether it's on geology or archaeology or climate science, you name it, into why had been four major cities over time disappeared. One of them is very familiar, and that's of course Pompeii. But you know, another was a Native American city that was like major metropolis. That was where roughly St. Louis is now, and one is Angkor. Basically, I mean, they're mostly environmentally related in one way or the other, combined with mismanagement. not that that's good news for us, but you know, it's still incredibly interesting. And Newitt's just a terrific job with this, and it's probably my most requested arc on the winter list for sure. So that's Four Lost Cities. World on a Wing, more great science. We've got a really strong popular science list for the winter. This is about migratory birds and the incredible science behind their migration, and of course the new threats that they face with climate change and how it's affecting those patterns. It's a great book. There is some California coverage in there, because one of the groups, I believe, starts in the fruit basket of California. So that's The World on a Wing by Scott Wiedenthal. Philip Roth. So this will be the literary event of the season. Whatever you think of the guy, of Philip Roth, he is inescapable in the literary landscape of the late 20th, early 21st century. This is a big honking 880-page biography of Philip Roth. Blake Bailey was given access by Roth and the Roth estate to everything he needed. So it's authorized in that sense, but there's no editorial control whatsoever. So this is definitely very much a warts and all biography. And I'm sure even as his admirers know, there are plenty of warts. So there's frankly a lot of not only literary gossip, but good old fashioned gossip in it. It will be, I think, on the front page of every single book review, so I think it's a big book to pick up. So that's Philip Roth by Blake Bailey. And then finally, Flight of the Diamond Smugglers, another book that's getting really, really strong indie response. Matthew Gavin Frank is truly sort of a writer's writer, and the origins of this is that he was in South Africa. He and his wife had a stillborn child, and they took the child there for burial because his wife was from there. And writer that he is, he stumbled across this story about that in the heyday of De Beers and the blood diamond industry, there's a major problem with smuggling. People worked in the mine would attach diamonds to the legs of pigeons and send them out to smuggle the diamonds out of the mines and to retrieve them later. It became such a problem for De Beers, and they had so much influence in South Africa, that it became a law that if you saw a pigeon and had the ability to kill it, it was against the law for you not to kill the pigeon. It's quite a story. He tells it really well. He's an endlessly thoughtful writer that always finds a quirky way into a story. So it's definitely like a really engaging, unusual read. So that's Flight of the Diamond Smugglers by Matthew Gavin Frank. And thank you very much.